Hey, everybody. Welcome back. As you all know, I am Jennifer Bulbrook with I Am Somebody, and my co host, Isabella Bradburn Jackson with Dear Divine Goddess. We're putting together this docu-series called Lost Souls Initiative, where we're taking people's stories and sharing them with the world, spreading awareness and hoping for change. Today, please welcome Ashley. Ashley, we have Ashley here today, and I don't know a whole lot about Ashley. I know she is a mom and that she is a police officer up
Was
until
a police
4 years
officer.
ago. And now she takes care of her beautiful babies. And I know that she was just in the middle of telling us a story that I think is a perfect intro to this conversation. So if you just want to start with that, Ashley.
Yeah, so what I was saying is because Isabel was just talking about how, the police did their part for the problems that they were facing with her brother. And I was saying about how I recall several situations when I was a police officer and the police, as far as they can go, is somebody has to be a harm to themselves or a harm to somebody else for them to be able to apprehend them under the Mental Health Act and take them into the hospital so that they can be seen by a psychiatrist. So there were many times that we would apprehend somebody, take them into hospital, and we're sitting in there with them for 10, 12, 14 hours waiting for them to be assessed. But there were times where the nurse in the ward, different nurses would go in and talk to them, and the person would say, I don't want to be here, I don't want to be here, and you'd hear them say, if you tell the doctor you're not going to kill yourself, they will let you go. So the doctor would eventually come in and talk to them, and what would they say? I'm not going to kill myself. And then we, two police officers, would have been sitting in the hospital for 10 hours with this person who, maybe was standing on a balcony ready to jump, or the edge of a building, or the edge of the Devil's Punch Bowl, whatever it is. All these different places happened so many times. And then they would say, nope, they're fine, they're going to go. And they wouldn't even keep them for the 72 hours because all they had to say was that they weren't suicidal. Doesn't matter what we saw, doesn't matter what the family told us. If that person said they were not suicidal, they got to walk out of the hospital.
That blows my mind. I can't even understand it. It actually brings me to a story that I was reading the other day about a woman in Alberta. She went into the hospital for suicidal ideation and wanted help because she was going to kill herself. And the nurse there asked her if she had ever thought about MAID. Yeah, which is
Oh,
medical
I,
assisted dying.
yeah, I read that article the other day, which is crazy.
It's
I
insane.
think that they're going to this, like, I think that the system is so overwhelmed that they even, like, in the hospitals, they don't have the resources that they need to be able to deal with it. So they're like, well, how do we deal with it? We either get them to go back home or we get them to kill themselves. Either way, they're not in our hospital. They're not a burden at the time.
Which is insane to me because that's where you go for your help, the
Yeah.
hospital. Like, I don't understand it. Like, my brother was brought in by police after being tased for a suicide attempt, and he hadn't even seen a psychiatrist before he was released.
Yeah.
They made him speak to a drug counselor.
Yeah. Which isn't going to help. There's been people, it wasn't mine, but I remember there was somebody, I want to say it was a female, who apprehended by police, taken to hospital, released by the hospital, left and jumped off a building and killed herself within an hour.
Jennifer
Is
knows
there
this
any
woman.
liability? Yeah. Is there liability on the hospital? Nope. The hospital never has liability, right?
Yeah, I know. I know. I'm actually going through that right now because my brother was formed by the first physician who saw him. And then somebody came in, shift change, and released him.
Mm-hmm.
47 minutes later, he was dead. Yeah.
Yep. And it's tough because a lot of the burden, I can, maybe I'm a little bit biased because of my past as a police officer, but a lot of the burden gets put on the police, and police are not psychiatrists, right? We're not people who are trained in drug addictions, like as far as like serious in-depth training, right? It's not you. Police were not meant to deal with this kind of thing. Police are meant to deal with crime.
Yeah.
Right. So, but now so much of that is being put on the police. And I just think that it's not the place for it to be. It needs to be trained professionals, mental health professionals, doctors, right? It's not, it shouldn't be so much put on the police. And I think that it's really, the system is really failing so many people all around because of that.
Absolutely. Because from what I see, the police are doing their job, and it's really not their job to be picking these people up off the street and making sure they get to the hospital, but they are doing it. And I know because they did it 3 times in a week with my brother.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we'd had to make a wellness check, and then there was another time he had been picked up. Like, they did their job. But when it comes down to it and things go wrong, the first thing people want to do is blame the police. Well, it's not their job to take care of them after they have been brought to the hospital. Whatever happens from there is on the hospital, not the police.
Yeah.
And, you know, like they're hating on the police right now because the police are breaking down encampments and this and that, whatever. But like, that is what they're being made to do. That's what they're being told to do. They have to do their job, right?
Yeah.
But we have
they
to
can't just stand there and say, I'm not going to do it, because now what? Now you're defying an order given by who? Who's the order coming from, right? If the service, the chief is being told that, it might be coming from the mayor, might be coming from the province, right? You can't now turn around and defy that order and say, I'm not going to do it. Then you get charged under the Police Services Act, and the officer next to you does it anyways, right?
Exactly.
Because you've been given that order to do that.
Absolutely. And it's like, we can't, we have to come up with a different solution, because I think policing the problem is no longer working, because there's no other support out there. So, okay, the police are doing their job and they're policing the problem, but then what else? What else? So what do? They move from one spot where the police have kicked them out to another spot, and they're just playing, you know, musical chairs.
Yep.
And we're wasting taxpayers' dollars by having these officers police all of these encampments all the time, where they're just moving around and playing, like, you know, cat and mouse.
Yeah, and there's nowhere, there's no housing, there's no shelters, there's no nothing for them to go to. Like, I'm sure if you ask them, do you want to be living in a tent in January when it's going to be -40, or would you rather a warm place and a solid roof over your head? I think they're all going to go with option 2.
Absolutely. Like, where do we put them, and where is the liability? Who's responsible for this? It's not the police.
Yeah. So this was a really hard part for me in policing, and I became a police officer on a whim. Like, I wanted to be a teacher. I think maybe I'm too optimistic of a person to be a police officer. I genuinely believe there's good in everybody. It doesn't matter, you know, if I dealt with somebody who'd been arrested 15 times, I still talk to them like they were a human being, because they are. And that's how the majority of officers deal with people. But the hard thing is, I remember one year I arrested the same person 5 times, right? And drug addiction, and every time just in, out, back on the street. And the problem is that our system is broken. Because, you know, now people are saying, oh, we'll ticket the people in the encampment. Why? What's ticketing somebody who's homeless, who doesn't have money to pay that ticket? What is that going to do? So our problem is that we think that the solution to everything is ticketing or arresting. Well, that's not actually the solution, because If somebody is robbing a bank, why are they robbing that bank? Because they have a fentanyl addiction. Why do they have a fentanyl addiction? Because they were sexually assaulted when they were a child,
Exactly.
right? Something like that. So let's go back and address the original cause of the drug addiction so that we can deal with that. Then we can get them off of the drugs. Then we can stop them from committing crimes. They don't want to be robbing banks to try to get $200 to get their next high.
No.
Right? But that they can't see another way out. So the problem is that the system is so broken all around because we're not getting to the core of the problem. And especially when it comes to people who are lifelong criminals, you're just taking them and throwing them into a jail with a bunch of other criminals and essentially saying, like, I hope you guys are going to fix each other because we're not going to fix you, right? Like, we're not going to help you. And, you know, there's nowhere near enough resources to be able to actually address the underlying issues that's causing everything. The homelessness, a lot of it is caused by drug addiction, mental health issues, right?
Absolutely.
So let's address those issues. Then we can tackle the homeless crisis, right? Because if you're not getting them the help, it doesn't matter that you're, you know, even if you are going to rehome them somewhere else, it doesn't matter because you're still going to have them all housed with the drugs together and everything. You have to find out the underlying issues and try to address those.
I agree. And I've been told before, if you want to learn how to be a criminal, go to jail.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? So it's like, you're not helping them by throwing them in a jail cell.
Yeah.
You're really criminalizing their minds because they're going in there to learn things that they didn't know before they went in there. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it's sad because this is all they know, right? So it's like somebody who has been starving and hasn't eaten in a week, and they go into a store and steal a loaf of bread. Like, how do we arrest them for that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, how do we arrest them for trying to survive?
Mm-hmm.
And I get it. You shouldn't be stealing from a store, a loaf of bread, whatever. And I understand it. I don't condone the behavior at all, but I look past it to see, like, what drove them there. They didn't just steal that loaf of bread because they just wanted to steal a loaf of bread. Like, they haven't eaten in a week.
Yeah.
They're trying to survive. And I just don't think, like, I think the police are doing their best, but I don't think policing the problem is working. And we need something else. We need a better solution. We need more supports. We need more resources. And that's where I believe that the federal and the provincial government both need to step in. Instead of all these cutbacks, like, we should be figuring out how do we, create more detox centers and more rehabs and, put more money into mental health, because that is exactly it. All of these people who are having mental health crisis or drug addiction are from trauma, and most of them is childhood trauma. So you're not dealing with the core issue. So the mental health is exacerbating the drug addiction. The drug addiction is exacerbating the mental health, and it's a vicious circle, and it doesn't stop.
Yeah, it's exactly true.
Because
we don't have the resources.
The core.
And when the pandemic hit, we saw even fewer resources. We saw, okay, now all of a sudden we're going to cancel your AA and your NA. And, shelters were closing down, like, limiting the capacity. And that's where a lot of this all started, right? Is then they were really putting people out on the streets, and they couldn't even go to the resources that some of them had. So you had so many people who then got over their, were getting better from their addictions, and we took away their counseling and their support services, and we're like, hey, good luck. Hope you can figure it out on your own. Right?
COVID was brutal because they didn't even have a Tim Hortons to go and use the washroom and do a bird bath.
Yeah.
They had nowhere to even clean themselves or to use a washroom because nobody was allowed in. It was COVID. Everything was locked down.
Yeah.
So what do we expect for these people?
Yeah. The resources should have expanded tenfold after COVID. And I don't think that
Absolutely.
they've increased at all, right?
They
Because
haven't.
you
I
had,
think they decreased.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. It's insanity.
It blows my mind.
Because yeah,
hmm
it does, right, Jen? Like it's horrible to even think about it. Like when you really sit there and think, okay, I get it. COVID, the lockdowns, trying to protect everybody. I understand it. But for 2 years, essentially, where were these people using the washroom? Where were they cleaning themselves? Where were they, having a shower or a bird bath? Did anybody care?
no.
Winter came, spring came, summer came, fall came. These these people are in extreme weathers 8 months out of the year between summer and winter,
hmm
and they're living in this. And I would not want that to be my child. So it's like, how do we let our people, our community, these are our people. They're Hamiltonians, they're Canadians. How do we let this happen? I have never seen so much homelessness in Hamilton as I have in the last 4 years. It's like they're spilling at the seams. There's nowhere to house them, and they're everywhere. Everywhere I turn, there's an encampment, whether it's one tent or two, they're there.
Yeah,
And it's
I
so
agree. I've
sad
never seen it
because,
either.
yeah, these are human beings. Every one of these people are somebody, and they are somebody to someone. A lot of their families are looking for them and don't even know if they are alive.
hmm
How is that okay? Like I just don't understand it. I don't understand how the government sees it and doesn't think that it's worthy of creating a solution for. And I get it. I know it doesn't happen overnight. We can't turn a ship around, you know, in an instant, but at least start putting things in place so that we can support them. If it wasn't for organizations or people that like me and Jen who really wear our heart on our sleeve and want to take things to these people and drop off Tim Hortons cards and take used clothing and used shoes and show up with cases of water or pizza or snacks or whatever. How do these people eat? And then we wonder why crime rate has gone up.
hmm They're just trying to survive.
They're not getting their basic needs met.
It's all a
You know?
ripple effect, right? Like whether you become homeless because of drugs or if you become homeless because of something else, because of like rent has gone up, but then now you're on the street and now you've been now your mental health's going and now you have, all this access to drugs. So now you have an addiction. Like, and it just, and whatever way you started, it's you somehow managed to get through all of the
Yeah.
stages because it's like a ripple effect no matter how you
One
go.
perpetuates the next.
Yeah. And it's, and I don't think it's all of like up to the police to fix it or anything. I think we all need to do it as a community. I think a part of it needs to obviously start on the ground on the streets because that's where it's happening. And, police are the ones that are to protect us and that. So I think the police need to be involved in that. But I also think that they do need to have the training to do that. And I don't think that they do. And I think that there needs to be somebody else on the ground with them who has the experience with them and who's there for just the mental health aspect of it all. And that because people don't always approach or respond to the police as they would a doctor or a civilian or whoever on the street.
Yeah. So Hamilton was actually the first service in Canada, may have even been in North America, to pair a mental health worker with a police officer. And that started before I left. So I left 4 years ago. I want to say it started maybe around 6 years ago. And that was, at that point, I don't know if it's changed the name at all now. It's the Mobile Crisis Rapid Response Team. And they work together all the time, right? Like they only work their shifts together, 12-hour shifts, daytime, nighttime, doesn't matter. They're always there. So if a call comes in for somebody who is in crisis, they're the first one to go. Because again, like the police, they don't have the resources to connect the people with afterwards, right? Whereas the mental health nurse does. But the mental health nurse, you can't have, I'm sorry to say it, but you can't have a 5'4", 150-pound woman going in to deal with a 250-pound man who is in crisis on her own, right? Like it's a completely unsafe environment to put that person in. So this way you're having somebody who can help to protect the mental health nurse, but we're also still able to provide the resources, right? So I actually think that it's been a really, really successful program in Hamilton, but the program's not big enough. And Hamilton is such a hub for mental health issues that the program needs to be bigger. But again, that comes with funding from the government, and the funding is just not coming in.
Yeah. That's actually who brought my brother into the hospital, like the MCERT team, right?
Yeah.
And that's great. Like I have no complaints at all whatsoever. Like they did their job. They went above and beyond, even after my brother's death, to come and visit my mother and I, not once, but twice, to see how we were. I got an email about a month and a half ago from the detective on the case, just checking in to see how me and my mother were. That they don't have to do that.
Mm-hmm.
They dealt with the situation that day. They put in their paperwork and their job was done, but they went above and beyond because they saw how really messed up the case was. So I have no complaints, but it's like we can't drop the ball in the policing's lap and then expect them to just deal with all of the problems. It's not going to work. Like they're overrun too. They're overwhelmed as well. Like our mayor just announced a state of emergency for opiate addiction, mental health, and homelessness in Hamilton. We can't drop that all on the police.
No, because the police are not the ones who created that crisis, right? Like police are not creating the homelessness crisis.
Exactly.
So I just think that, there needs to be other resources that are put there. And, like all the training that police get to deal with mental health, like at the end of the day, they're not psychiatrists. And you can't expect them to be because they haven't gone to school to be psychiatrists. Exactly. So, police are taught how to deal with somebody when they're in crisis, right? So how to deal with it in a way that keeps them safe and you safe, right? And, but there's so much more obviously out there, but it's just, there's not enough resources to train the police to the extent that they could be trained in order to have all the knowledge possible to help everybody, right, who is in a mental health crisis. There needs to be more mental health workers on the street, whether they're with police or in groups or whatever that is. There needs to be more of them to be able to go out there and try to address the issue.
Well, Jennifer
we're taking money out of our healthcare system as opposed to putting more money into our healthcare system.
Absolutely.
What is, if you can talk about it, what is like the protocol right now if like you go to a call and it turns out somebody is in a mental health crisis or something like that? Like what would typically happen from there if the police showed up first?
I can only tell you what would have happened when I last was a police officer, because I'm sure so much have changed. I have not policed since COVID hit, right? Like it's been 4 years since I had my last day. So I can tell you from having gone to calls, we receive the call and whatever information is passed on to the dispatcher. And sometimes there's no information provided to the dispatcher, right? The police going to the call, they can only go based on the information that they're given. So, a lot of times you don't have any information. You have that, so-and-so is suicidal and we need police, right? So you go and it's just trying to assess the situation as quickly as you can. And sometimes you have 10 seconds to assess a situation.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have 2 seconds or 1 second, right? So every single one is different. But the goal, obviously, is to get there, to assess the situation and to make sure that it's calm so that you can figure out what's going on. Have a discussion with family, because the family is going to give you more information than the person who's in crisis, right? The family might say, no, they had a knife to their throat 10 minutes before you got here and they said they were going to kill themselves. Whereas the person is saying, no, I'm totally fine. So they're going to get all of the information and they're going to take all of that information and decide, you know what, I do think that they're going to harm themselves or harm somebody else. We need to take them to the hospital so that they can be seen by somebody who can hopefully get them the help that they need, form them, keep them in for 72 hours, right? And that kind of stuff.
When you go to the hospital and you do have an incident where the nurse tells them, just tell them that you don't want to, kill yourself, or that somehow that ended up happening where the doctor just kind of lets them go that same time or whatever. Are you there when they let them go? Like, are you able to say like, no, they need to stay? Is there anyone there to advocate or to speak for this person who is, even if they're saying like, no, I'm good now, anyone there to dispute that?
No, because a lot of times what happens is police, when I did it, they have to stay at the hospital as long as the hospital deems the police to be necessary. So if they think the person might harm them, right? Or, sometimes security would come in and take over, but sometimes they would say, you know what, they're fine, you can go. Other times, if the person was more violent, right, then police would have to stay. But again, like, police always conveyed all of the information. So hey, I went there and they were standing on the ledge of a building and it took us 15 hours to talk them off of that ledge with various people involved, and now we're here. And even with all that information, they'll still let them go.
I think too, though, and I think like, yeah, like I don't think you should be made to stay or whatever, but it's like, it's also like kind of a thing of telephone where like you've told the like one person that you're talking to, that person's telling the next nurse, and then if there's a shift change, oh God. And then finally the doctor's hearing the news. And by then it's like, what all the information is really being relayed. And I know they're supposed to write it all down and it's all in their chart, but like we have to really rely on everybody reading the charts and all that kind of stuff too. Do you have any idea how, or any opinion on how we could kind of make that transition a little bit more smoother, where I don't know, we don't go through down so many different lines of like communication, or like there's like, I don't know, some special tab that you need to press and open before like looking at a file? Like, I don't know. Do you have any idea on how we can like make the transition of communicating the patient's severity that they're in better?
So again, I don't know what's changed in the last, handful of years. We did also fill out paperwork, and on that paperwork, we would tell, the information that we had. But the problem is that sometimes it could be 12 hours before a doctor could come in and see them. And like, to take two police off the street to just sit there in a waiting room possibly for 12 hours to relay the story, right? It's not practical, because, there's only so many police officers on the street at any given time. So I don't know what's changed now, but again, I know that, we used to write down all the details, and that would then go on to the doctor to be able to read it right from, this is the information that I know, I'm putting it on paper. That paper then goes to the doctor for them to read. So I don't know if it's become more in depth than that, but I know that that was at least there. So the doctor does get to see, firsthand what the police officer who is involved wrote.
I think it's just crazy that they make people wait. And it was the same with me when every time I had gone into the hospital for like a suicide attempt or self-harm or whatever the case may be, it was like you wait sometimes for like 12 hours. You're right. And by 12 hours, it's like I just want to get the hell out of here. They don't care anyway. They're making me wait. Like obviously it's not that big of a deal if they don't care. And so and I know it's people are going to say, well, there's lots of patients out there, but how many psychiatrists are hired by the hospital, and where one can't come down and deal with, it's just, it makes me wonder why an emergency room doesn't really have a psychiatrist who is more accessible to them, where the patient doesn't have to wait 12 hours.
Well, St. Joseph's does have emergency psych. So they have emergency psych, which is right on the same floor as the eMERGE, which is right across the hall from the eMERGE.
I've been there. You still wait 12 hours.
Yeah, but
that's what I'm talking about, because that's where police would take them, right? Is into the emergency ward, and that's where you wait to be seen, and that's where it could be, I don't even think that there was one time that I was in that room for less than 5 hours, right? Like a lot of it was always a very long wait. And a lot of those times, even like the 5 hour time, it's okay, you can go. I don't know how much longer they waited to see a doctor at that point.
Yeah. And that kind of goes, it kind of goes with the whole thing. Like, it's not an emergency to them because the person's not already taken the medication or slit their wrist or whatever the case may be. So it's not an emergency to them, so they can wait. But what's going to happen in that time frame? Like they're suffering, they are struggling at that time, and they're there for help, and we're just letting them wait. And if they would have come in already taken the meds or whatever, the psychiatrist would have been down there already. And that's where I'm like, why are we waiting? Like, why are we keeping people waiting? Like, that to me is the neglect on our mental health system that nobody really is addressing.
Yeah, it's a complete lack of resources. Like, they don't have enough people in there to be able to deal with it. Like, they know that the mental health problem in this country is far bigger than it was 5 years ago. Have they increased the number of staff to be able to meet that level? No, not at all. Like, they're decreasing staff, they're decreasing funding, right? So it's just the matter of there physically are not the people in the building to deal with those issues.
And really, what's the training like?
Yeah.
It's insane for me to hear you say, like, you can say that, like, in your experience, you have not been there for less than 5 hours, because my brother was brought in by police after being tased, which means like he was actively trying to harm himself and being aggressive with the police officers. 5 hours in and out, from suicidal to the point where police had to tase you, to you're absolutely fine, you're no longer suicidal, and you're not intoxicated, go home. In 5 hours.
Yep.
Mental health crisis.
And where is the responsibility on that doctor who lets them go, right? So that they can then go jump off of a building, right? Like, but the problem is there's no responsibility on them, so they don't have to carry the weight of that decision, right? Whereas, like, when I was a police officer, if I ever stopped somebody for impaired driving, and, can't tell you how many times, oh, please just follow me home, please, 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 if I did that and I followed them home and the next night they killed somebody, that's on me. First of all, that's on me. Personally, I would never be able to live with myself. But second of all, professionally, that would come down on me huge. I would have had charges under the Police Services Act, like crazy, like all of these different things. But it just seems like there's no responsibility that falls on to the healthcare system when they just, it's a revolving door, right? And we're just trying to get people in and get them back out as quick as possible to empty out the emergency room, as opposed to let's get them in, let's address the issue so that they don't have to come back 52 more times.
The last time my brother was brought in by the police was his third attempt in a week. We had already saved his life because he, intentionally overdosed on fentanyl. We had to give him Narcan, send him in. There was another time when he stole my mother's car and smashed the shit out of it. Like, I don't even know how he drove it back to my mom's house. And I said, where was the accident? Because my heart went right into my stomach because I'm thinking, oh my God, did he hurt somebody? Did he kill somebody? Like, when you see a car that messed up, you automatically think, like, what else? Right?
Yeah.
And he said it wasn't an accident. And I'm like, what do you mean it wasn't an accident? He's like, you know what I mean? Because he didn't want to live. He was trying to kill himself. So, of course, I called the police to make sure that there was no reports of an accident. There was nobody gone to hospital because, like, I couldn't sleep that night because I'm thinking, what did my brother do? Like, who did he hurt? Because he was in psychosis. He was having a mental health crisis. And all 3 suicide attempts, he was gone to the same hospital. And then you released him 5 hours after being brought in by police. This is our system. My brother's story is one of thousands. He is not the only one. He's not the first and he won't be the last. And
that's the
not
saddest
okay.
part of it. Yeah, that's the saddest part of it, right? Is that he's not the first and he won't be the last. Because it's going to keep happening until they address the issue and put the resources into the system that are needed.
And it's like, something has to be done because everything is increasing. Like, since COVID, even child abuse has increased. If you look at the numbers, domestic violence has increased. Like, it's all skyrocketed. People are not okay.
Yeah. Well, then you took
help.
You took kids who maybe lived in an abusive home whose only out was going to school every day. And now you said you don't get to go to school. Now essentially you're trapped in this jail of your home every day with your abuser. Same thing in domestic violence, right? Oh, you can't come into the workplace anymore, right? Where you needed to make a paycheck so that your partner could take every single penny that you earned away from you, right? And your only escape from your partner was to go and work at Tim Hortons every single day, right? And then you weren't even allowed to go and do that anymore.
I know. And it's like, there's the problems. Where are the solutions? They're not even attempting to come up with the solutions. But I was watching one of their little things they do at the parliament, but they're fighting for money to move the science center from where it is to the exhibition stadium area. Build a new building, tear down all those exhibits, bring them all over because they're super sensitive, pay to have them installed, and then get rid of the old building. But you cannot put money into our healthcare system for mental health and addictions. When people are dying daily,
because it doesn't give them the
every
money.
11 minutes, someone is dying of fentanyl poisoning in Canada and the United States. That is 6 people an hour. That is 6 families an hour that are being destroyed, that are being traumatized. And it's just going to continue to perpetuate the problem of mental health, the problem of addiction, because people who are having issues, pain, emotional pain, are self-medicating through drugs because they're not getting the help they need from the doctors, the psychiatrists, the counselors, the therapists.
Yeah.
So the problem's just continuously getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and nobody is coming in with the white flag to say, hey, this is what we're going to do about it. But let's move the freaking science center because, hey.
What's a few $1 million?
Like, where are our priorities? And immigration, like, I have nothing against refugees and being a savior, for people like that. But my problem is we have people living on the streets here already. How are we supposed to house the people that are coming in from other countries when we can't even house our own people?
We can't even
How does
house
that
them.
work?
They're bringing them in and they're living on the streets now too, right? And it's like they're not like are in such a housing crisis that is going to continue to get worse over the next couple of years. I think we're already short over 500,000 homes. And we brought in 1 million immigrants, I want to say, which is the most ever in a year in Canada.
And they say most of them are
don't
coming
have
to
anywhere
Ontario.
to live. Yeah, and they're all coming to, Toronto, right? And they have nowhere to live. We already have thousands of people who don't have anywhere to live, so we're going to bring in another million.
Yeah.
Right? And bring them in, and then what? Like we're not providing anything.
Does that make sense though? Like I don't understand where the government sees that it was like that's okay. Like how does that make sense? We can't even house our own people. And I'm not against helping other countries, helping refugees. Like I'm not against it at all. I believe, in helping where we can, get in where we can fit in, right? But like help our people first. Like you can't bring more and add it on plenty. Like we have nowhere for these people to go.
We need to be doing it in the right way though too, because like what we do is like we bring in these immigrants and you might be a doctor back home, but guess what? We're only going to let you drive a taxi here. Well, you know what? Why can't we create a standardized test that says when you come to Canada, if you're a doctor back home, you can write this test. We're not asking you to go back to school. You write this test. If you pass this test, you're now a doctor in Canada. Let's let them use the skills that they have at home here.
Exactly.
Because you're getting a lot of highly skilled people coming into our country who want to work, right? Who want to be able to contribute to the economy and have homes and have good lives and raise their kids and that kind of stuff.
But we're not giving them that because
here. We're not allowing them to do their job that they're trained to do. So they're just wasting the skills that they have, and we need those skills. We need those skills. But we're just like, well, we don't have any way to figure that out. We don't have a way to we don't have this standardized test. So forget the, doctor school that you went to, forget that you're a nurse, forget that you're a vet, right? Because you're not allowed to do that here because you didn't do it in our country, which I think is ridiculous.
I have 2 friends that I worked with when I was a PSW, and they are both from the Philippines, and she was a massage therapist and he was a PT. They can't do that job here unless they go back to school for it because they weren't trained here.
Which is not fair. Who says that our
they both went into PSW
system?
work?
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand it. Our government needs to rehaul. Like, it needs to be, when they were saying, what were they saying about the police to
defund the police.
Defund the police. We need to defund the government. Like, break them down. Build it back up from the ground up. Right?
Yeah, stop them from being able to give themselves raises. Like, imagine if you went to work and you're like, I feel like I deserve to make $10 more an hour. Okay, let's make it happen. Right? Nobody else gets to decide on their own raises. Why does the government get to decide on their own raises? Like, to me, that's crazy. Like, until you fix these problems, there should be no raises. Until we don't have homeless encampments at every single park with a splash pad in the city, you don't get a raise because you're not doing your job.
No. And the sad reality is, like, it's hard for me when I have these conversations with friends and family because they're like, they need to get out of the parks. Like, our kids can't even go to the parks. There's needles, there's this, there's that. And I get it because, with these encampments, because like there's drug addicts, there's mental health, all of it. And I get it. But my defense always is they go to these parks because a lot of them have bathrooms.
Yeah.
They want to be
They
close
have
to a
bathrooms.
wash so they can
Yeah,
clean up.
and
They can use the washroom. They could do what they got to do.
yeah, and the splash pads, because again, they use it to be able to clean,
Clean.
right?
Yep. And I get it. Like, I feel bad for the kids, but I also feel bad for these adults who are living day in and day out in a tent. Like, we go camping in the summertime. Woohoo, let's go camping. It's fun. It's fun to do it for a weekend or a week. But I don't see anybody doing it like for a lifetime. Some of these people have been out there for 10 years, 11 years. We have people dying, freezing to death in the winter. Canada winters are brutal.
Yeah.
Freezing to death. That is somebody's mother or father or brother or child. Like, we cannot keep allowing this to happen. Like, there's no way. It's insanity to me.
Yeah.
These are human beings, and there's so much stigma around it. It's so easy to like walk by them and scoff and be like, oh, get a job, go to detox. But you don't know their story.
Yeah, because you can't see it, right?
Exactly.
Even like a cancer patient who loses their hair, people will look at them and, you know, have pity or feel bad for them or whatever it might be, because they can see that they have,
Compassion,
cancer,
yeah.
and they're going through treatment. But you can't see necessarily that somebody has mental health issues, because especially in the beginning, people try to mask those issues as much as they can, right?
Absolutely.
They hide those issues from their family, their friends, all that kind of stuff. And I think that we just have this weird thought of, if you can't see it, then they're okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And when you do finally see it, it's gone too far, right? And now they do have the drug addiction, or they are living on the streets because, you know, they were manic for so long and they weren't paying their bills and they lost their house, right?
Yeah. So unfortunate. And I don't have all the answers. I don't claim to, but something needs to be done. The government needs to step up and be like, okay, let's do this. You know, they work for us. We don't work for them.
Yeah.
They work for us. And everybody is sitting around waiting for the government to say what they're going to do. No. It's our job to force them to do what we need them to do, because we are the people. They work for us. They don't get to dictate how and when. We get to do that. But we have to stand up and show them, look, like, this isn't what we're like, this isn't okay. We're not dealing with this anymore. Like, pull it together.
We have to be a united front too. And what the government is really good at is driving a divide between people.
Absolutely.
Right? Because if you are divided, you will not come together for the same cause. Right?
Oh, so we saw it big time with COVID.
Yeah. So again,
vaxxers,
vaccinated,
anti-vaxxers,
unvaccinated,
maskers,
masking,
anti-vaxxers,
not masking,
right?
Whether it's race, religion, your sexual preference, it doesn't matter. They love driving a divide between people, because they know that is what is going to stop people from rising up to create the change.
Yeah, it's the only way they control us is by creating divide.
Yeah.
And a lot of us are dumb enough to fall for it.
Yeah.
I don't
really,
see, and I don't think the government can put a divide there unless we let them. So, like,
absolutely,
to give the government all that power and control is like, just, I think that's, I think what we need to do is really sit there and, like you said, take it all, tear it all down, and start from the beginning, the groundwork, and rebuild a foundation and relook at things, because things aren't how they were back in 1920 or fucking whatever, or even 1980, even in 2000. Things have changed, and we need to relook at the foundation of it all. We've been putting all these band-aids over the years, and these band-aids are now falling off. Nobody knows what to do with them. And so they're just like patching them up with this like tape, and it's just not happening.
Yeah.
And it's people suffering in all different aspects. And I don't think there's going to be one solution. I think there's going to be many different solutions, because there's many different problems. But like, we need to get to the core of it all, and it's going to start with really rebuilding that foundation. And that can't happen if the government and the people aren't agreeing that that needs to happen. And I don't think anybody's really even looking at that. People are just like, well, what are we going to do today to fix today's problem? Like right now, like a quick fix, another Band-Aid. And that's what I think the government keeps looking for, is a Band-Aid, instead of really looking for, okay, you know, whatever.
Yep. And the problem is that if people don't feel safe, they won't address the issues that they're going through. So if you look at the countries where, you know, they don't have welfare, they provide housing. So like, we're not going to give you a check every single month, but we're going to give you an apartment, right? And they don't have the same kind of issues that we have, because, you know, you might be in a mental health crisis, but now you're given a home, right? Somewhere where you now feel safe. And maybe now you can start to address the other issues because you feel safe. Nobody, even the person who does the most drugs in the encampment, they don't feel safe in there. So they're not going to address their issues in a place where they don't feel safe.
They're in fight and flight 24/7, like hours a day. 24/7. They're in that, like, you know, fight or flight, right?
I think that's not even just including people that are, you know, living out there. I think it includes everybody. Like, if you're a parent and you're going through something and you reach out for help, you're like, I know for myself, one of the first thoughts to my mind is like, is CS going to get involved? Like, am I going to lose my kids? Like, and what are other people going to think about me? And then all of those too. And those are serious, like, relevant concerns, because I have seen CS come in and take kids that don't need to be taken. They've come in and taken kids that do, but like, but I think that as soon as you say there's a mental health issue, then it's like, oh, boom, then boom, 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 boom. Like, we have to look at you in a whole different light. And they do. The court systems do. The workers do.
Yeah, they look at us like we're irrational.
Yeah. Am I going to lose my kids? Am I going to lose my job? Or do I just not reach out for help, so that at least, like, you know, my kids can stand under my roof and I can keep going to work? Because it's a fear of, what are you going to lose if you try to get help? Because there's so much initial judgment on everything.
That is one of the reasons why I suffered through postpartum depression on my own, because I was terrified to tell my doctor I was having postpartum depression, because I didn't want them to take my baby from me. And, you know, my postpartum depression had nothing to do with harming my son, and like, we were bonded great. I was breastfeeding, but mine was something happening to me and him being left alone. Like, I would be terrified to go do the laundry, because I'm like, what if I fall down these stairs right now and he's in his crib, and like, I'm laying here dead and nobody knows.
Like,
and
you can't stop that from coming. You don't know that that's going to happen. You can have 4 kids, and on your 5th kid, you have postpartum depression, right? Exactly. Like, there's no way to stop that before it happens. And then, so people are in that already, in crisis, or having, you know, bad day after bad day, and they are too afraid to reach out for help. But you can't prepare for that.
No. You know, and even just your hormones after having a child, they're all over the place, right? And it's a big ongoing joke. Oh, she's hormonal. It's just the hormones. Like it's a big joke, but it's really not, because like, it's a lot. It's a lot, just the change in hormones, whether you're pregnant or postpartum. Like, that is a lot for any human being to deal with. And then on top of all of that, and your body healing and becoming a new mom with a baby and trying to, find your footing, now you have postpartum depression. But you can't go for help because you're going to be judged and you're going to be looked at, and CAS might take your baby. So what's happening now? These women are not getting help. They're isolating and they're suffering in silence. I don't know. I don't know the answers. I really don't. But Jen Bonner and us, we had a conversation with her episode, and she was saying, like, we need to promote more healthy communities where we're making communities healthier and safer, like especially like the real high risk communities in the areas, and like where all the bad boys and the bad kids are. Well, that's because those are the areas with children who have the most trauma.
Yeah.
Right? Poverty, trauma, single family homes. Like, we need to reach out to those areas and really start trying to help these kids before they become adolescents, adults, and have their own kids, and they're just perpetuating generational trauma. We need to get them when they're young so that we can alleviate a lot of these issues. But they're not. Like, they're just being thrown to the wolves, and it's like, pick a struggle,
We need to take the stigma off of therapy.
Absolutely.
Right? Like, there's no problem in you saying, I'm going to the doctor because I need amoxicillin. Right? Yep. But why is there a problem in saying that you're going to speak to a mental health professional because you're not doing so well? Right? Why is there a problem with getting our kids therapists if we're starting to see that, there's a problem and we don't know how to address it as parents? There's such a huge, huge stigma around therapy, and it blows my mind. I can't understand it. I don't know why that's a thing that is a part of our culture.
No, last year my son was having a really hard time because we've had the last 3 years has been really tough for my family. We've had a lot of loss, and the principal had said to me, like, what about getting him a social worker in school that he could talk to when things get a little harsh, or like overwhelming or whatever for him? And I'm like, do you really think he needs that? Because, like, I'm aware and I have open conversations with my son, and we do all the work, and like, he can talk to me about anything. So I was like, does he really need that on top of like what we're already doing and all the coping strategies I taught him and stuff? And he's like, listen, if your kid needed glasses or if your kid needed a hearing aid, you wouldn't even bat an eyelash, right? To make sure he got those glasses or those hearing aids. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, he's struggling. Your family has been through a lot, and it's not your job. It's not your job when you're struggling and you're grieving to be his therapist.
Yep.
And I think as women, we take on all of those hats because we're mom. We got to make it all better. Like, we got to make sure we do everything for our kids, right? So a lot of kids are kind of slipping through the cracks. And like, that's even me, somebody who's fully aware of all of it. Like, the work we do. We've been through a lot of things together. And it's like, still, he may have missed out on counseling because I thought what we were doing is good enough. And it's not sometimes. They need that third party.
Yep, it's true. Yeah. A lot of people, like, they won't necessarily open up, or they just need somebody who, they think that you're saying something because you're a loved one, right? Whereas if a professional says that to them, then they might take it differently They might take it more seriously, right? They might be like, oh, maybe there really is a problem. And it's not just that my mom or brother, is telling me that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what it's going to look like in another 10 years for our children, but I certainly hope things change real quick because I'm terrified for them.
Mm-hmm.
At the increased rate that all of this shit is perpetuating, I don't even want my kid to go outside, but I can't isolate him.
Yeah.
You have to let a kid be a kid and learn and experience and grow, but it's terrifying.
Yeah,
what do
I
we do?
agree. It's a tough spot, right? Because
we're at an impasse.
I don't know what the solution is. I wish that I did. I wish somebody did.
Right? I know. And I don't think, like Jen said earlier, I don't think it's one solution and there's not one fix all.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things that have to be addressed in order for things to really kind of neutralize.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think the police deserve a lot more credit than they're getting. They always get the shit end of the stick. Like everybody's ready to be like, oh, the police, the cops, this, but in all reality, like they're dealing with a lot more now than they ever had to, because on top of all of the criminal stuff, they're dealing with all of our social problems too.
Yeah. And there's only so many resources within the police service, right? Yeah. Like you're having officers who are working like double the amount of time. So they're doing their regular hours in a week, and then they're also working overtime for the same amount of hours that they've just worked, because they're so low on police officers and there needs to be so many people on the street. And when you're getting called every single day, can you come in? Can you come in? Can you come in? So they go, they're overworked, right? It's really tough because it's probably the job where I think you get shit on the most.
Yeah.
You get it at social media, you get it from the media. And I can tell you from doing that job, 99.9% of those police officers are doing it for the right reason, but our system is broken. So when you're working with a broken system, there's only so much you can do.
Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't get seen that way. It's just like, oh, they're just sitting at Tim Hortons drinking their coffee and eating their donuts.
Yeah. Meanwhile, they're sitting there car to car and catching up. Yeah, because they just did 6 calls back to back and they got to catch up on their notes, because if you don't have notes and you get called to court for something, you're in trouble. Yeah. Well, how many calls can you remember in a row before you have to stop and catch up on your notes or catch up on your reports, right?
For sure. For sure. Yeah,
Yeah, and I don't think we're gonna come up with a solution today, and I don't think we'll come up with one tomorrow. But I think that what we need to do is just keep talking about it and keep coming up with ideas and actually start implementing some of them and not just talking about some of them. Like I remember hearing about these, tiny houses for them, like year and a half, 2 years ago, that are still not there, like for whatever reason, right?
Well,
and I don't even know what reason, whatever, but
I think
there was a project that was approved already at one point, and they had a location, and then that location just it fell through.
The community.
But that's the thing. Fuck the community right now, right? Like, think about it. Like, we're listening to people who are in their houses tell us that we shouldn't build a tiny home there because they don't want some homeless person to come move in with them. Well, fuck you. Too bad. Like, we're a community where we need to start supporting one another and stop judging. Would you rather them in a tiny home or on the street?
Yeah.
Like, really think about
it. You can't say get them out of our parks and then, oh, well, I don't want their tiny home right there. Like, pick a struggle. You can't have it both ways.
Yeah. And we need to start talking to the people who are dealing with the stuff in hand, the people who are living on the streets right now, and not just the addicts, the ones that are there because of the financial shit and the homelessness, because, you know, interest rates have gone up, rents have gone up. There's a lot of people on the street for that reason alone. We don't want to forget them. And we don't want to say, like, you know, it's everybody's fault that they're on the street. It's not everybody's fault that they're on the street. Some yes, some not. But we need to look at everybody, the mental health part, the addiction part, the fucking financial part, all of it. And it all needs to be addressed separately. And then we should come back together. But right now, I just don't know what they're doing. It's like they're just trying to solve it all in one big sweep, which is not going to happen, right? It's just that's where the Band-Aid effect keeps coming in.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to keep you any longer. It's been interesting to kind of hear from your perspective and really kind of learn of some of the what goes on in the background. Like, you know, when you go to the hospital and things like that, I've, you know, been able to experience it on my end, how I experience it personally and things like that. But just to hear it from your perspective and to really let other people know that, like, you know, you guys are just human too. You guys are doing your job. And, you know, it's really starts from higher up of where we need to really start to address our solution, our concerns with, and not just the people on the ground, but going up higher and that. So I want to thank you, first of all, for, you know, for when you were policing, and that, and I appreciate you coming on here and talking with us. Is there anything you want to maybe end with, a note or a message for anybody who's struggling or with the government and how they're dealing with their system or anything?
I just want to say, like, for somebody who's struggling and listening, like, even though you think that you may have taken all the paths or there's nobody out there, you know, there is still help out there. And it's tough because, you know, the hardest part is taking that step to go and do it. But you may not see the value in your life, but your life does have value. And whether it just hasn't been found yet, you know, because you can't see it, but there's other people out there who see that value. And, you know, it's at the end of the day, if something happens to you, you never get to make that mark on the world that you were put here to make, because we were all put here to make a certain mark. And if you can find the strength to go get that help, you're going to be able to leave your mark in the world, and you might be able to help the next person who needs that help.
Absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ashley. I know you're very busy. You're a mama of two, an entrepreneur, like you're doing your thing, you know, and I'm very proud of you for that. But I know that, you know, you're busy. So I thank you very much for your time with us today.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for asking me.
It was nice meeting you, Ashley. And for all those listening, you know, if you have an idea, if you have a story, an opinion, please reach out to us. Please share your opinions and your ideas, even if you think they're small, because like I say, it could bounce off somebody else's idea. And then next, you know, we have a great big solution. And it just has to start with one idea. That's it. One idea. That's how the light bulb was invented. That's how everything was invented. One small idea. And if you're struggling, please reach out. We're here for you to help you in any way we can. If you have a story you want to share, please reach out and we will help you share it. To everybody else, to alls, have a good one, and we'll see you all next.